Hi, good evening. I'll start with a question that might feel a little uncomfortable, especially for a hall that has successful business people. What if your greatest success is your biggest constraint? What if the very thing that got you here is the thing keeping you from getting there? Think of a curious child. In the early childhood, when the child is growing up, it's trying various things, it's exploring constantly and failing often, and always asking what else. If this didn't work, what else, what else, what else? But this happens only till the child succeeds. And then a very strange thing happens. Success creates a formula. The formula gets repeated. The repetition gets reinforced. The formula ossifies. What worked becomes the must be done. This is the only way to succeed. The exploration stops. A startup that discovers product market fit quickly keeps running the same playbook after the market has moved. So I'm going to use this as a metaphor from early childhood, how a baby grows, to how startups begin their journey and how the startups grow. And after that, after the success formula has been found, another interesting thing happens. Either the startup or the child is on an upward spiral or a downward spiral. A startup that learns from early failures and builds systems, not just products, is on an agency building upward spiral. Every success kind of builds the startup for the next success. So the capabilities compound. A startup that doubles down on their first successes, never questioning the first formula found, is on a downward spiral. It's agency robbing. And if there are early gaps, because the startup doesn't reconnect with its core essentials often, the early gaps widen as the startup grows. There are three instincts at play, whether it's human beings or it's businesses. There are inborn instincts that we are born with. This is the founding DNA, the industry you are born into. If you are a startup in a certain industry, you kind of inherit a kind of DNA from that industry. There are imbibed instincts which are absorbed through experience. What success or failures teach you, they become your instincts. And then there are induced instincts, which are deliberately introduced through training or through leadership changes. So that's the upward spiral, and that's the downward spiral. One is agency building, the other is agency robbing. But something else happens too, something less obvious. With each success, you are building a world. If you remember Malgudi, R.K. Narayan's Malgudi days, R.K. Narayan's fictional town Malgudi had its own streets, hierarchies, gossip networks, and unspoken rules. Swami, the characters, Swami, Margaya, Raju the guide, each make sense only within the world's logic. The stories emerge from the architecture Narayan had first built. Before the story, there is a world. If you remember, R.K. Narayan actually built, he created a map for Malgudi. He created the characters for Malgudi. So first the world comes, then comes the story. If you look at Pandora and Avatar, James Cameron spent years building Pandora before he created Avatar. If you begin writing without building a world will still get built, but it will lack coherence, depth, and sound internal logic. Your organization is building a world too, knowingly or unknowingly, a world that has visible and invisible architecture. Let me take you back to 1915. This is the first time the concept of world building actually was discovered by the world. Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien, if you've seen Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, he started creating his Middle Earth around 1915. And his first story came only in 1930s, The Hobbit. And after that, the Lord of the Rings trilogy happened only in 1950s. So he meticulously built and crafted this world, the geographic constraints, the boundaries, the histories, the assumptions, the interrelationships between elves and dwarves and hobbits and men. There are cultural logics and there are shared meanings. There is a visible architecture of the world and there is the invisible architecture of the world. Now, I call this invisible architecture a meaningplex. It's a portmanteau. It's a combination of meaning and complex. A coherent architecture of assumptions, boundaries, unwritten rules, and shared meanings that determines what is possible and what is unthinkable. So that's the meaningplex. Leaders do not think about their meaningplex. They think within it. Over the years, as instincts kind of develop, that becomes your hardwiring. And suddenly, you are thinking, or you become slave of your own meaningplex, and you are always thinking within it rather than outside of it. Okay, here's a children's story. There's a pond, and this pond has a typical water ecosystem. It has its flora and fauna, and the fish and the frogs and the other things. The frogs, being frogs, every once in a while they jump out of water and do their thing. They just jump around and kind of come back. They come back with a lot of stories. They come back with a lot of stories about this world outside water. And when they come back and tell these stories, the beings and the little animals that can't go out of water listen to them with rapt attention. And that goes on for a long time. Till one day, a baby fish asks a very interesting question. He says, Uncle Frog, you say when you go out of water, you see animals, you see humans, you see birds, you see things. Must be a fascinating world. But what is water? The frog's kind of stunned for a moment. The frog doesn't know how to tell fish what water is. Something that was born in water, lives in water, will die in water. If there was a double PhD in water, that should be the fish. But if the fish is asking that question, how do you describe the thing that is everywhere to someone who has never experienced its absence? For most organizations, success has made their world invisible. They are the fish asking about water. When we work with organizations, that's the first question we ask. We say, if you were a fish, what's your water? What's everywhere is critical for your existence, but you can't sense it. But an outsider will. This is another analogy to understand world building and worlds. Imagine a house, and that has a group of children playing hide and seek. Now, this house is a world for these children. It has its visible and invisible architecture. What's the visible architecture? The children can see it, and so can the adults. There are rooms, and there's furniture, there are little spaces around, etc. Everyone can see it. That's the physical architecture of that place. Then there is an invisible architecture, which only the children know, because they're playing hide and seek. What are the easy spots to hide? What are the places that are very not so easy to find? The parents' room has a volcano and there's lava there. Don't go there. What is clever hiding? What is cheating? That's the shared knowing of these children. Adults don't know it. This is the children's meaningplex, the coherent matrix of meanings that hangs together and only these children know. Now imagine if these children were to go to a new house, a friend's house. They will carry their own old meaningplex into a new house. So new house, same meaningplex. Now imagine a new group of children coming to this house. So same house, new meaningplex. Now compare this with how organizations work or businesses work. Businesses pivot to new markets. The world around the business changes, or they pivot to new markets, new technologies, but carry their old meaningplex with them. Or new leadership arrives and suddenly the same structures, the same processes feel entirely different. The world and the meaningplex can change independently. And that's where the confusion lives, that there is no congruence. There's a paradox here. Success builds worlds. Success also makes these worlds invisible. The more successful you are, the less you can see the architecture that made you successful. And what you cannot see, you cannot change. And to make things more confusing, if you have set up an organization or a startup or you run a business, you're not just one organization, you're actually 3 organizations. The first is projected. What you say you are. You know, your website, your advertising, your investor deck, your vision statement, this is stated. This is what you say you are. That's your projected self. By the way, you can compare it with humans too. We have our projected self. We have our real self, how you actually operate, where decisions actually get made, what actually gets rewarded, really, not stated. And then there is perceived, how the world sees you, what customers experience, how talent perceives you. So there are 3 selves that humans have and businesses have: projected, real, perceived. And imagine a small child, the innocent child that's not been corrupted by the world yet. All 3 are the same. Projected, real, and perceived are the same. As the child grows up, they become different. This is what happens in businesses too. In healthy organizations, these 3 overlap significantly. In troubled ones, they drift apart and no one notices. That's the problem. These become 3 different selves, and no one inside the organization has noticed that some change has happened. Now, let me take an example of Indian IT industry. Now, suddenly, we see Indian IT companies going everywhere in the world and telling the world that we are your digital partners, that we are about co-innovation. Our approach is outcome-based. That's what we are saying as Indian IT industry. Indian IT industry talks about digital we are digital transformation partners. We are about co-innovation. We are outcome-based. This is what they say. But if you look at the history of Indian IT industry, we've always been about optimizing billable hours, expertise in people and not in systems, input-based economics. This is what we've been about. And our business models are still the same. And we are still monetizing the same things. Although we project an image of being knowledge partners, but we are at the end of the day about billable hours of certain number of people or cost arbitrage. When IT arrived, many expected productivity gains. Instead, they discovered the expertise was individual, not institutional. AI is arriving as a force that exposes the world you have built. So you built a world. AI will amplify that world. It learns from your real patterns, not what you say, not your projected patterns, but your real patterns. AI amplifies and scales your meaningplex, whether you've articulated it or not. Success teaches successful organizations the answers, and the answers become invisible cages. Again, imagine a child who's been told that he's very smart, that he's gifted. What happens? A smart child label starts as a gift. Over time, it becomes a cage. Being smart means having answers. Having answers means not asking questions. Not asking questions means not taking risks. Not taking risks. The curious child who once asked, "What else?" becomes an expert who already knows the answer. And that's what happens to businesses as they grow. And this gets exposed during transformations. Not incremental innovation, not incremental change, when transformation is needed. We call them step change. When a step change is needed. And a step change is not a change within the world that you are in. The step change is a change of the world itself. When the assumptions that made you successful become the assumptions that make you irrelevant. How do you see what success has made invisible, therefore? Surely, so these are the issues. But how do you deal with these? There are 2 movements needed. Think wide and think deep. Thinking wide is about making sense. See, looking beyond your own organization, looking beyond you and your value chain that ends with your customer. Looking at the supra systems that you are a part of. Looking at the industry ecosystem, the supply side, the demand side, the access. Looking at the other players of the ecosystem, how the industry ecosystem architecture is changing. Looking at the socio-cultural system that you are a part of. the macro. And thinking deep is about going beyond the surface, looking at the invisible architecture that you leave untouched every time you come up with a new strategy. And the new strategies are only about surface. They are not about making changes at mental model levels, at unwritten rules, at the levels where deeper assumptions reside and the boundaries are. This is the infrastructure this is the architecture that's not visible to you. Surface level changes leave the underlying architecture of the world untouched. The world reasserts itself, and the transformation fails. Thinking deep requires you to primalize. Primalize doesn't mean going back. Primalize means going deeper and reconnecting with your core essentials. So therefore, we came up with this methodology, and I'm going to take you through these 4 or 5 slides very quickly. We call it the world model, and it's about asking 5 very fundamental questions whenever you are faced with a challenge of transformation. The first question you ask is, what game are we really playing? That's the waters question. What waters are we in? What game are we really playing? Second one is origins. What history still governs us? What old traumas or successes have now changed our instincts in a manner that we get dictated by those? But we need not. So origin stories, roles. Whose worlds are we touching? Whose worlds are we ignoring? So roles is R. L is load-bearing frictions. You know, every business exists out there because it's uniquely placed to deal with a certain cultural tension out there, a certain cultural tension in the world. So what are those load-bearing frictions? What tensions define our edge? And finally, D, doctrine. What are our real rules? Not the stated rules, the real rules in the company. Who holds the power? Who takes decisions? Really, not as per the published hierarchy. So that's the doctrine. Now I'll take you through, I'll share with you 5 examples that will bring alive these 5 for you. Now let's look at waters. What game are we really playing? And NVIDIA is all over the place, is all over in the news these days. Now, NVIDIA has rediscovered new relevance over the years. In 2012, if you asked, what game are you playing? What business are you in? They would have said, we make GPUs. That's what they were, a GPU manufacturer. Now, by the time 2016 happened, they again, when people asked them, what game are you playing? What business are you in? Their answer was, we are an AI infrastructure enablement company. Now, deliberately naming themselves as that changed everything for them. The product, the talent, the partnership strategies, everything changed. And by 2020, Jensen Huang was saying, we are an AI factory. Now, that created a moat around them, and they are the most influential company today when it comes to AI. Patagonia. Now, this is the origin story. What history still governs us? Patagonia is a US retailer into outdoor clothing and gear. 1990s, they faced a near bankruptcy, and something strange happened. Now, they experienced bankruptcy because there was an issue, supply chain issue, because most of their raw material comes from nature. So therefore, they were having problems. Rather than having to fight that, what they did was they made sustainability or environment stewardship their purpose. And that changed the whole process for them. They named it, and then their strategies changed, that compounded resilience, that inspired their purpose, and it avoided unexamined legacy. So that's the origin story. IKEA is another very interesting example where defining customers as active co-creators and adopting for growth. Roles. Whose worlds are we ignoring? When IKEA came in, you know how IKEA operates. They sell flat pack furniture, where the customers assemble their furniture themselves. Now, that's been their norm, and that's how they've been, and that's embedded in their pricing and proposition. When they came to India, they realized something very interesting, that this was viewed by Indian customers as penny pinching. Rather than say that these customers, what kind of customers are these? They respected local culture, understood the world the local customer lives in, and started to offer assembly services. They trained a league of carpenters who would come and assemble. So you see how they changed the role. So the question is, whose roles and whose worlds are we ignoring? And therefore, that changes the way you do business. McDonald's. Now, for years, McDonald's has been in the business of, now this is their load-bearing friction. What tension defines us? What tension defines McDonald's is the paradox of standardization versus local adaptation. You know, they want to preserve their brand, but they also want to thrive locally by adapting to the local culture. Now, they've been doing it for years across the world. And when pandemic happened, this is the quality, this is the ability that helped them survive, not just survive, but thrive. You know, coming up with contactless delivery and sustained operations. Final example is that of doctrine. What unwritten rules really govern us? You know, this is a very interesting story. In 2014 to 18, Amazon built an AI tool, recruitment tool. And by then, their focus was diversity and correcting the gender balance, you know, hiring women and others. Now, surprisingly, when they built this AI tool, they noticed something very interesting, that the AI tool was throwing up only a certain kind of profiles, and all of them were men. And it was systematically rejecting women. And they thought, what was the problem? And they went back and saw it. They realized there was an issue because AI was picking up, was looking at the history of Amazon and looking at, and it was trying to define what is a successful hire. And the successful hire of the past was only a man. And it was only replicating it. So therefore, it was throwing up only men and systematically dropping women. And they had to scrap the tool, go back, redo the whole process or the AI tool, and then they got the results that they needed. So this is the world model. When it comes to transformation, strategy is not the starting point. World building is. The organization that cannot see its own architecture will keep solving the wrong problems with increasing precision. The world you have built is already shaping your future. The only question is whether you will see it in time. That's it. That's my world building presentation. And that's me. If you want to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn. Thank you so much. I can take any questions if there's time. Otherwise, you can connect with me and I will respond to you.